In today's video, we're going to be learning the anatomy of skeletal muscles. We're going to be peeling away the layers. So imagine you took away the skin. What would you see as you went layer by layer all the way down to the protein? I want to walk you through an exercise that I routinely take my students through once we've discussed what we're looking at right here. And that is, if you had a needle and you stuck it through the skin and you went all the way to bone, which layers would you be going through from superficial to deep? And I think this is an extraordinary exercise to help you just understand how the body is layered. And so we can see the vast majority of those layers in this single image. However, there are 3 layers that we cannot see, so I want to discuss those just right now, and then we can just start going from there. And those are going to be parts of the integumentary system, which includes your skin but is not only your skin. So the first layer being the epidermis, right? That's going to be the thing you first interact with that needle as you poke through the skin. You're going to go through the epidermis, which is made of stratified squamous epithelium, and then you're going to find yourself meeting the dermis, which is the really tough portion of your skin right underneath. This is where you find all of the nerve endings, the blood vessels, the sweat glands. This is made of a very dense connective tissue. But then under that, that's where you're going to find the adipose tissue. So this layer is called the hypodermis, or the telesubcutaneous, or the subcutaneous tissue. Honestly, there's so many names for the hypodermis, it kind of gets to be a little ridiculous, if I'm being honest. But I tend to call it the hypodermis. I think it's the best term in my personal opinion. But regardless, that's where you're going to find fatty tissue. That's also where you're going to find some fibrous tissue. And from there, we can look at this image and kind of take over, because this image is one of my favorite images to look at. Whenever I show this to students, it kind of just like, it just sucks you in, because you get this really deep understanding of just how tubular we are, how we are just, tubes within tubes within tubes, and there's just layers within layers within layers. And so this is showing you a skeletal muscle, and it's showing you, imagine you could grab an individual muscle cell from that skeletal muscle and telescope it out. In fact, it even goes deeper than that. There's this tube right here, which you can see is called a myofibril. That is an organelle of protein that's located inside of the muscle cell. So perhaps, you can remember back to 8th grade biology, mitochondria, lysosomes, peroxisomes, those are organelles. Skeletal muscle cells have their own unique organelle called a myofibril, and this is what's going to be constructed of protein. Now, in today's video, we're not really going to spend time diving into all of the different formations that the protein takes. Super interesting, but I want to address that in a future video. Instead, I want to stick more so with what you can see with the naked eye. Again, we're just kind of following that needle as it's going down. So up to this point, we have gone through, again, epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis, and that is where we meet the muscle. But muscle tissue is going to, I guess before we actually get to the layers of the muscle, let's just kind of like distinguish between 2 regions. We have what's called the muscle belly and the tendon. Now, the muscle belly is exactly what you think of when you're thinking of a muscle. So just like picture a muscle in your head right now, like biceps brachii or rectus abdominis. That's the muscle belly that you are picturing. It's the most complete part of the muscle, and that is going to contain everything else deeper down to it. The tendon, on the other hand, is going to be dense connective tissue. It's called dense regular connective tissue, and it's basically a bunch of collagen that is, this is wild, blending directly into the bone itself. And so this is one of my favorite facts, is because sometimes people may wonder, well, how does a muscle pull on a bone? Well, it doesn't pull on the bone like it's hugging the bone and then rips it this way. Instead, what's happening is the muscle turns into bone. They literally blend into each other. And that'll make a little more sense as I can go through some of these layers. So I don't want to drop terms right now that you're not going to be familiar with, but I just want you to know the muscular system is continuous with the skeletal system, which is why you're often going to hear people say the musculoskeletal system, because this is essentially just one continuous network. So we have the tendon here in white, and then the rest of this is going to be the muscle belly. But what we now can do is look at this pretty much layer by layer. And the first thing you are going to meet is the deep fascia of skeletal muscle. And that is what this is right here. So if you're looking closely, you can see like there's this layer here. Well, the outermost layer on top of the muscle is going to be deep fascia. There's also what's called superficial fascia. We're not going to, again, get bogged down into those details right now, but deep fascia is that thing that is going to wrap and compartmentalize muscle groups. So, like if you think about it in the thigh, the reason you can say, oh, I have hamstrings versus quadriceps is because there is deep fascia that is like, think connective tissue that is literally bundling a group of muscles together. We call that deep fascia. So fascia wraps the outside of muscles and it groups them together, or at least the deep fascia does. Now this is made of what's called dense irregular connective tissue. Dense irregular connective tissue is collagen that is scattered in every direction, meaning that, like, imagine if you had a sheet of it. And collagen, which has a high degree of tensile strength, which means it's there to essentially resist being pulled apart, you could pull on that sheet from every direction and it's going to resist that stretch. That's what dense irregular connective tissue is going to do. That is different from a tendon, which is dense regular connective tissue. The collagen in the tendon is all headed in one direction. And what that means is that the tendon is extraordinarily strong in one direction. But luckily, your body doesn't allow you to do this, but you could stick your fingers through the tendinous fibers and you could pull them apart as long as you're pulling them apart, perpendicularly. So the point I'm trying to make here is strength with connective tissue is really based around the direction that protein, that collagen protein, is traveling. And so in the tendon, they're all headed in the same direction. They're all parallel to each other. While in the fascia, they're going to be headed in all sorts of directions. And that's going to be true with our next layer here, which is called the epimysium. So again, this is the fascial layer. And then if we go down, you can see there's another layer right here. That's the epimysium. Epimysium is also made of dense, irregular connective tissue, just like the fascia. This time, though, instead of wrapping and compartmentalizing groups of muscles, it is going to only be surrounding an individual muscle. So when you are, say, dissecting, and you are looking to try to find an individual muscle, you would actually try to find the epimysium because that is going to clue you in that you are looking at an individual muscle. So like in a cross section of, the arm or the thigh, for example, you would see little white lines. And that is the epimysium, and you can go, oh, that's vastus intermedius, or oh, that's, rectus femoris, and you're able to name it. So epimysium allows us to name a muscle. So you could say this is biceps brachii, this is rectus abdominis, so on and so forth. But epimysium is deep to the deep fascia. Now, from there, it's going to show you all these blood vessels. You can see there's blood vessels inside of here, which makes a ton of sense. You got to have blood supply going to and from the muscles. So those are basically going to be traveling underneath the epimysium, and they're going to be going between our these things that I actually, I'm going to kind of skip it around a little bit. Do you see where it says muscle fascicle? If you look closely, you can see that there's almost like these bundles. These bundles are the fascicle, or sometimes you could say fasciculus. So together, the plural form would be fasciculi. It's all these, it's like an island. Like you see just an island, and if you look inside, you're even going to see these little tiny little cells. In fact, they've pulled out a fascicle here, the illustrator did, so we can see one individual muscle fascicle. The thing we want to keep our attention to is that on the outside of the fascicle is more connective tissue. We call this connective tissue the perimysium. So perimysium is once again made of dense irregular connective tissue. So just as a quick refresher, that meant deep fascia was dense irregular connective tissue, epimysium was dense irregular connective tissue, and now perimysium is made of dense irregular connective tissue. The difference isn't in what they are made of, although there are differences if we get really specific. The differences really come into what are they wrapping. So again, deep fascia wrapped groups of muscles. Epimysium wrapped an individual muscle, while perimysium is going to wrap bundles of skeletal muscle cells. So if you can see here, again, we have this fascicle, and we can pull out these individual muscle cells. These are skeletal muscle cells, which are multinucleated cells. They can be really long, although they don't have to be. And they're going to have multiple nuclei, which is going to be essential because since they're getting to be so long, one nucleus just can't really, be responsible for all the protein synthesis or be able to, be asked about that type of thing. I'm not going to get into the nuances as to whether or not the nucleus is controlling the cell here. Just understand one nucleus is not really big enough or not able to cover all the available real estate inside of an individual skeletal muscle cell. So these are going to have multiple nuclei. The point here is the Perimysium wraps groups of them and creates that fascicle. And then what you do is you wrap all of those fascicles together in Epimysium to create the actual muscle. So from there, we then see what says Endomysium. But to understand the Endomysium, we really need to see this thing. You see where it says muscle fiber? Muscle fiber, muscle cell are basically the same thing. So a muscle cell, that skeletal muscle cell, if you looked on the outside of it, it would also be wrapped in connective tissue. However, this time we would call this like loose areolar tissue or loose connective tissue. So it's the same type of thing, right? We have collagen, but now there's just less of it. And that's going to be important in order for, the muscle cells are going to be, there's a lot of movement. You also need to be able to deliver blood vessels and down deeper into here, because remember these blood vessels that were underneath or deep to that epimysium, where those are going to start getting smaller, providing little tiny offshoots, capillaries towards these individual muscle cells. And so you need to have something that's loosely arranged so that that blood vessel can get where it needs to go. Just understand, every single individual muscle cell is wrapped in a connective tissue layer that we call endomysium. And then, if you pulled out that is where we'd meet the myofibril. Now, we're going to stop here for today in terms of I do want to, but I think it might be a little much if we got into all the different aspects of the sarcomere. Just understand that you could then further telescope again, pulling out that organelle of protein. It's like a tube of protein, essentially, that is going to be the contractile unit of this skeletal muscle cell. So basically, you can think of the myofibril is the functional unit. This is the thing that is going to contract and typically get shorter, but it also could get longer, depends on what's happening. And then you're going to have a bunch of myofibrils making up a single muscle cell. Then you're going to wrap that in endomysium, and then a bunch of muscle cells are going to form a fascicle, which is wrapped in perimysium. Then you're going to have a bunch of fascicles that are wrapped in epimysium to create a muscle, and then you are going to wrap multiple muscles together, and that in fascia, and you're going to have a muscle group. It's crazy when you really start thinking about just how layered this really is and how much connective tissue is doing its job. It's connecting everything. It's just kind of putting it all together. Absolutely wild to think about. Now, what I want to do though is now we have the understanding to properly explain a tendon, because a tendon is a continuation of the connective tissues surrounding muscles. So a tendon is going to be made of epimysium and perimysium. So the endomysium, if you recall, is going to surround an individual muscle cell. But the perimysium and the epimysium, those are more about bundling. So when the muscle cell stops, the perimysium and epimysium continue on. So you can imagine, you see this where the red is turning into white? That is where the muscle cells stop, but the connective tissues continue. And what's going to happen is the epimysium, the outer layer of that skeletal muscle, is going to blend into the periosteum of the bone. Periosteum is made of dense, irregular connective tissue. This is the connective tissue that wraps the outside of the bone. So now we have dense, irregular connective tissue from the epimysium, dense, irregular connective tissue from the periosteum, literally blending together. And then the perimysium is going to blend inside of the bone and go into that compact or cortical bone, which is really wild to think about. This is why when a muscle contracts, the bone can't help but to move. Because what's happening? like they're one and the same. This is why you may even see in certain injuries what are called avulsion fractures, where the muscle and the tendon, they don't rip. Instead, the bone breaks off because that tendon is so strong. It's absolutely wild to think about how all of this works. So what I want to do now is put it all together, all right? So again, we have our needle. What you're going to do is you're going to go through the epidermis, dermis, hypodermis, deep fascia, epimysium, perimysium. Then you're going to get into the endomysium and then into a muscle cell. And from there, if you really kept going, you would find yourself poking these little organelles, these long tubes of protein called a myofibril. And there are, by the way, a lot of different muscle cells in the body, right? It really depends on just what type of muscle. If you're talking about, I don't know, like, the tensor tympani muscle inside of the ear, inside of the middle ear, you're going to have very few muscle cells. But if you're talking about more massive ones like adductor magnus or gluteus maximus, you're going to have much more. We can get into the tens and hundreds of thousands of muscle cells depending on which muscle we're talking about. So what I want to do now is I want to take a short quiz. And so the quiz is only going to test us on the structures we just discovered, but I want to show you how our quizzes work and how they can reinforce your learning once you've explored things with the Atlas. Okay, so what I've done is I have created a custom quiz. This is one of my favorite features we have here at KenHub, where you can decide what you want to be quizzed on, because sometimes, there's certain things that you just want to know right now to better help your studies. So I've gone through and selected the relevant ones. And so what we're going to do now is start our quiz. And you have different options. You can use a study session. You could do an exam quiz. The basic difference here is going to be one of them is going to come with spaced repetition, whereas the other one is more just testing you. And you're like, well, what's spaced repetition? Well, that is basically just saying, hey, if you miss this question, we're going to show it to you again. And then we'll show it to you again. And even if you get them right, we're going to show them to you again. But we're going to space that out, and we're going to show it to you in slightly different ways. And studies have shown that this is one of the best ways to help retain information. So that's exactly what I want to do. And again, the exam quiz is more about just testing your knowledge, seeing how you're understanding it, which also can be highly, highly useful. I'm going to go ahead and lower this down to 5 minutes, and we're just going to start this quiz and see where things go from here. So, as we can see up here, which image shows muscular fascia? So I will give you a moment to kind of just look this over. You can always pause this if you need more time, but then we will kind of keep on going with it. So if you remember, fascia, so the muscular fascia or deep fascia is that outermost layer. So that is going to be this one right here. But real quick, I can show you that we can actually go back and click on this eye icon, which can be nice because we can also see it from slightly different images here. And it's cool because you can see where from this image, which is just absolutely phenomenal, you can see the different muscle cells inside of there, the different, well, it's more of the perimysium and the fascicles as that is turning into the fascia and the tendon, and just seeing how everything is getting together is really, really cool to look at it from this view. But we're going to go ahead and get out of this and go to our next question. Now, which image shows the epimysium? Which image shows the epimysium? That is going to be this one. Remember, that is the dense irregular connective tissue that is just going to be deep to the deep fascia. Remember, that wraps and creates an individual muscle, while the fascia is more about compartmentalizing and creating those muscle groups. Which image shows the perimysium? So as you're looking at this, you can see the highlight here in green. You can also see the highlight here in green. So that is going to be this one right here. Now remember, perimysium is going to be deep to the epimysium, and this time it is going to be wrapping bundles of muscle cells or muscle fibers, creating what's known as a fascicle. All right, we're doing good. We're doing really good. But now what you'll notice is as you progress through these questions, then we like to start to spice it up a little bit more. It's like, you feel good with 2 pictures? Well, here's 4. All right, so now it's asking for the muscular fascia. Which of these is going to be the muscular fascia? So that is going to be this one down here. Again, that dense irregular connective tissue that wraps and compartmentalizes. How about epimysium? Which of these is the epimysium? That is going to be this one right here, deep to the deep fascia, and it's going to create the individual muscle. Which image shows endomysium? So that's going to be this one right here. And I want to actually hit the eye icon. And the reason I want to do that is just so we can see it a little bit bigger. And I want to also help you understand that, just breaking down the terminology of these terms is very, very useful, because endo means within, epi means on top of, and peri is essentially saying around, more or less. So what that means is you have the endomysium is within the muscle, epimysium is on top of the muscle, and perimysium, that is going to be like bundling around and within those fascicles. So going back here, again, endomysium, that is going to be this one right here. Endomysium made of loose connective tissue or loose areolar tissue that is going to be surrounding individual muscle cells. All right, now perimysium. It's going to be this one right here, creating the fascicle made of dense irregular connective tissue. Which image shows the muscle belly? And I really like this. I think it's doing a really good job of showing the similarities between the two, because if you look closely, you're going to see bundles on bundles and bundles on bundles. But the muscle belly is going to be this one right here. It includes everything. Remember, everything that's going to be deep to it is going to be part of that muscle belly. This is really just what you are classically thinking of when you're thinking of a muscle. So that is going to be this one right here. Which image shows the muscle fascicle? Which of these is a fascicle? So that is going to be this. Now again, remember, the fascicle is created by the perimysium, but the fascicle is also going to include the structures that are inside of it. So, you could think of it almost like the myofibril, the muscle cells, all of those belong inside of that fascicle, because a fascicle is just a bundle of muscle cells. Endomysium, go a little fast. We have about 30 seconds. It's going to be this one. Let's see what we got. What is this? Oh, I love it when now it's like you just got to figure out what it is. So I'll give you a second for this one. That's going to be the fascia, the muscular fascia. What is this? That is going to be the epimysium. And then this will be our last question, the muscle belly. Once again, you can see it here, and we'll go ahead and click on that. So again, these quizzes are, great. Again, forget, you can always save a copy of this quiz. You can revisit it. If you ever don't complete these quizzes, you can jump right back in. So I'm going to hit don't save here, and you can even see your progress as you've made it through. Again, these quizzes are designed, at least the one I just took, that study session, those quizzes are designed to help improve your understanding of these structures. So what's fun is you can start taking these quizzes even if you don't even know what you're doing, and by the end, you will know where those structures are, what they look like. You'll even know how to spell them as you progress through the quizzes. It is an absolutely phenomenal way to understand it. So my hope is that you now could tell, friends at a party, everything that, every single layer from the epidermis all the way down into the bone. It's a fun little party trick. Most people are probably not as nerdy as you if you're busting it out, but I still encourage you to embrace the nerdiness. We all need to have some more nerdiness in our lives. But please let us know in the comments below what else you want to see us discuss in future videos. There are obviously a lot of structures in the human body. That's kind of what we do here at KenHub, is we teach you about each individual structure as best we can. So if you think of something that you're like, I would love a complex breakdown of this area or this structure or even this tissue, go ahead and let us know in the comments below. And while you're down there, please hit the like button. That actually helps this video do very well. And chances are, if you've made it this far, you did find this video useful. So please hit that like button. And that'll just help this video do a little bit better. But thank you so much for spending time with me, and I will see you in the next video.